John Cranna. I'm going to talk about subsidence cracking. I'm a structural engineer, but you're probably wondering why am I just MICE? Because quite a few people that call themselves a structural engineer are qualified through being a member of the Institution of Civil Engineers. I think there are some other structural engineers here. So we can be MICE or Struct-E, or both, but hopefully not neither. Can I go on to the next one? So that bottom line, if you're fans of Dr. Strangelove, you might recognise the phrasing of that. So I suppose it's a bit perverse to say, but cracks and movement as building is something that I just really like to see. And there's nothing better than a good big crack. Remember going a few months ago with the estate manager for a local estate, because I live in Abergavenny in South Wales. They wanted me to look at two buildings. He said, do we need to unpin that? Well, no, you don't need to unpin that, and there's no cracking. He says, oh, what a waste of time in coming out here. And then the next one went to a barn, and he showed me, oh, that's a proper crack. That's, you can put your hand in, Because I've got a next door neighbour who's a retired ex-fireman, and we had a big fire in the building in Abergavenny, and he said, you shouldn't really say it because, well, nobody died, but the whole building collapsed. He said, that was a good fire, Because in big cracks, you learn your trade, as it were, You get the whole variety of small cracks and big. And the other interesting thing is, people can be really upset, distraught by very minor hairline cracking, or they can be basically not give a damn about small cracks. I remember there was a widower in Swansea in my early days, and she had this big crack, and her dead husband had said to her, he was a surveyor for Swansea Council. He says, oh, that's just nothing much, And you could, it was filled in, but you could have put your hand through it. He's like, I shall just keep you company with the wind whistling through it during the day. So you get this whole variation of tolerance of cracking. That's the other thing. I'm not the first structural engineer to give this talk, because there's Mike Royale who's given talks before. And I probably won't be the last, but there are 10 structural engineers who've given talks before, and 7 about subsidence cracking. But JJ didn't say, oh, we don't want another one. He said, oh yeah, do. And we do. I think what's interesting is we all give our own, quite unique, hopefully, slant on it. So, a bit about my background. I started working with Ovarups, and this was the building I got my site experience on. You might recognise it, Lloyd's of London building. And that was cracking up before it was during construction. I don't know if you know the building, but they've got all those reinforced concrete columns. They're on the outside. They're about a big fish width. They're about 1.2 meters diameter, and they were getting plastic settlement shrinkage cracks. So we had to actually fill them in with resin during the construction. So that was just by the by. And then I went to work for Scott Wilson, And I was working on the refurbishment of what was the Charing Cross Hospital. And this bit is a Grade 2 listed building designed by Decimus Burton, who did the Palm House at Kew Gardens. And it was being converted to the police station, because Charing Cross Hospital is now in Hammersmith. I don't know if you know London very well. But people are waking up in hospital saying, where are you? You're in Charing Cross Hospital. This looks like Hammersmith. It kept its name and it just moved over. The reason I put it up is that that's all stucco rendering. It's made, it's a cheap way of making it look like stone. And it's actually all solid brickwork behind, but based in lime mortar. Now, I was working on this in the late 1980s. And the interesting thing was, I'll talk about how good lime mortar is for buildings, is that when we were doing all the specification for the repair work of it, I don't think we mentioned using lime mortar at all. And I think as an architect, yes, I can see you squirming, you get hung, drawn and quartered now, if you didn't. But it was just accepted. What we did have to make sure, actually, was that the mortar the builders kept on making their mortar too strong. We were doing cube tests, like you do for concrete. when you're mixing it, every now and again, you take cubes and you get it tested. We did the same thing for the mortar, and it was just coming out too strong. So, and again, I'll refer to that in, yeah, I think it was the last slide, yeah. And then you can see I'm going down in quality of buildings. That worked for Halcrow when I moved to Wales. I referred a lot of it, but this was, funnily enough, does that look like a safe building? There are two things. There's that cracking there and that sign saying about it. And this is me now, or rather that's a barn conversion. So I did a lot of surveys of barns, and that's just me and my happy place, really, with my ladder up there, having a poke in there because there's no stairs up. In the Welsh countryside, just having a great time. Right, now, that's nice big foot. What would a Microsoft PowerPoint presentation be without some meaningless headlines? So format, well, basically I'm going to talk and you're going to listen and hopefully stay awake. But I say that because when I started giving the talks, a few years after I was made redundant from Halcrow in '92, and about a few years I started giving talks about cracking. And I tried to encompass a whole load of cracking, subsidence cracking, this cracking, and I just bored people rigidly. And I actually saw, it was an evening lecture, so they were just falling asleep. So, dear. And then I gave another talk, and I remember one of the reactions I got, I incorrectly looked at it, and it said, "We know all about this anyway," so I gave up giving talks. But the other thing is to say is please ask any questions as I go along, so they don't hold them up till the end. Expectations and consequences. I'm hoping this to be just as much instructional as educational, in that I want you to be able to, at the end of the day, maybe not know completely how to spot subsidence cracking, but I've got all the, in the notes, a reading list. So if you get hold of that, and you'll be able to have the wherewithal. Really, what I'm going to be talking about today is subsidence cracking, which really I come across very rarely. And there'll be another slide showing why I come across it rarely, because I'm in the wrong part of the country to come across it a lot. But if you can spot whether it's not subsidence, then a lot of people's fears are cracking and foundation movement, subsidence. If you can cross that off the list, then that's half your battle done. The other half is, well, what is it? I say, because I'm not going to cover that. I might cover that. No, JJ's gone. Well, he's come back. Hopefully, if I do a return spot, if he wants me back, talk about all the other type, because there is in one of the BRE digests I talk about, that's called about why do buildings crack. There's about 17 or 18 different reasons why buildings crack, other than foundation movement subsidence. Right, subsidence versus settlement. Well, that's the blurb there. If I show you, this is a house foundation. You may think it's a sponge, but it's not. It's a house foundation. And this is a house. So when you, and the other thing that's completely wrong with this is that you build, yeah, I can see it in the back, is that you don't build a house and then put it on the foundations. Of course, you build it, foundations, and then come to DBC, and then you put the walls on. But if you see, hopefully, I'll put that down, that when I put this this house, this jam jar, there'll be a slight give in the sponge, but then it takes a load. So there will be a certain amount of settlement. So the whole point of putting your foundations are that you spread the load. Okay, so you will get settlement. I mean, even if you put it on rock, this is a brick. It's not going to. There's no visible means of it, but you will be squashing the atoms at the top. So there will be a micro amount of movement. But is that movement manageable? And the whole point of, well, hopefully, and certainly when you're doing big buildings, you will do site investigations to find out what is the nature of the ground, what kind of foundations. When you're doing housing, you tend to go by, well, what's happened in the area. So subsidence is what happens afterwards, in a way. I mean, most of the settlement of building it should be over within a few months. I think when, was it Mike Grant who gave a talk about 2 years ago? I think he was trying, we all have our own definitions of subsidence and settlement. And he said one, and I can't remember now, but there is somewhere that says, well, subsidence is something that happens 10 years or after, which is a load of rubbish. It can happen just a year after. So subsidence is when you got the consequential down move. So basically, something happens to the ground to change the nature of that supporting. So it could be escape of water, it could be shrinkage, it could be someone had a mine going underneath it. I'll show you that. But it's, yeah, and the bottom two, the way I look at it, is settlement is what expected, and subsidence is unplanned. And basically that's what the insurance people are looking for. So if you get excessive settlements and say one part of the building settles relative to the other at the very beginning, because on one bit of the house is on hard ground, another bit is on soft ground, then that's poor site investigation. So that wouldn't be covered by insurance. Reading list. Now this is in your booklet there. So there are well, there was one document that I think and anybody doing surveying of buildings and looking at cracking should have, and that's BRI DGEST 251. And I was speaking to one structural surveyor, called himself, and he says, oh yeah, I know that. But well, there are many surveyors who maybe don't know about it, but that is assessing, assessing the damage of buildings by classifying the cracks. So if you look on my page number 3, I reproduce, well, I can go. I reproduce, well, that table, but not in that form, but I show all the different categories of damage there, 0 to 5. So what I'm saying is that whenever you come across cracks in a building, one should be, because I get really fed up when in many things like evaluations surveys, and they say the structural movement in the building, and that's it. That's all the information I get. Okay, valuation reports or surveys, whatever you call it, don't need to be very involved, but they do need to at least point the person in of what it is that they've spotted. So if they see, I don't know, say very poor roof covering, whatever, they would say that, I think there's something wrong with the roof. They wouldn't say that. But they say there is structural movement. And I think, what we should think, there is a crack in below the ground floor lounge window, and it's of a certain size. And I think also they should refer to this table, because if it's it goes up to 2 millimeters in size, then it's 0 to 1. And that's saying it's hairline, and you don't need to do very much with it. So that's a lot, in only a short, say one line, say describing the crack, and adding that table to that valuation gives you a heck of a lot more information, especially to the mortgage lender, because the mortgage lender themselves aren't technical, so they don't know whether this structural movement is bad or not. I'm getting a few quizzical faces. But, so just to go back, so yeah, that's 251. Other one that I think is quite useful is 361. On this document, as I say, it does have a list of cracking that is not due to foundation movement. And so they're the two BRE documents I think one should have. Right. The other thing is books, and I was speaking to somebody, and I can't find the book now. Where would I put it? But it was a BRE book called "Has Your House Got Cracks?" Who was it I was speaking to about it? Oh, yes, it's you, right? I brought it in, and I may have left it at the back. But, oh no. Yeah, is that the book? Oh yeah. because it's a really good book. It's actually for, it's that one. It's actually for homeowners, but it does go through, all cracking. The other book that is quite good is, now structural engineers in here will know about the first 2 editions of it, Subsidence of Low-Rise Buildings, which is this book here, which is, I must admit, for a surveyor, it's probably, quite heavy, and there is a complete rewrite of it, actually, and it's called Subsidence. Okay. Nice, snappy title. But the best book that I think there is on cracking, which is this one, is now sadly out of print. I don't know if everybody knows of this Cracking by Peter Dickinson. Nope. I'll be using a part of it. But yeah, sadly that's out of print. You can get it for about 100, 150 quid. Because I think I probably bought it for 30, 40 quid. The other book that is in print, now that's by a surveyor. So that Peter Dickinson is a surveyor, okay? So it's interesting. I said that to somebody earlier. Well, the 2 books I got on cracking are all by surveyors. So it's kind of ammunition to my thesis, as it were. You don't need to be a structural engineer to report on, accurately, give the right information, and diagnose cracking. This other one that is in print, which I'm kind of down with faint praise, is okay. I don't know if anyone's got this. This is a 2nd edition. It's Practical Guide to Diagnosing Structural Movement in Buildings by Malcolm Holland. Nope, I'm not doing very well here selling books, but oh, you have got it. Okay.
I used to work with him.
Oh right. Oh, I better be careful. There are some things. Well, I'll just be blatant. There are some things that are just wrong, but there's a lot that's right. And as I say, the important thing is he's a surveyor and he's written a book, so it's what. I mean, the other thing is just generally, because at one point I felt, all surveyors are a load of rubbish. I haven't got any idea how to. Trouble is, what I get referred to me, and probably other structural engineers will say this, is, I've done it again, is our surveyors who've refer things onto you, who are maybe young, maybe inexperienced, or just don't know very much. What I don't know of it are the people who do diagnose cracking, okay? It's a bit like Peter Cook, when he was doing the sketch shows with Dudley Moore. He did this character called E.L. Wisty. And there's one routine he talked about himself. I'm a miner. He says, I couldn't do the judging exam because they're too difficult. He says, I wouldn't say all miners are stupid. It's just the miners down my mine are particularly stupid. So I kind of realise is that the surveyors I got are particularly stupid. And if I say that, I'm not going to get out here alive. So I mean, everybody else here is fine, fantastic. So that was that. Let's move on. So we've done that. So this is what BRE Digest 251 asks you to do. And on page 2 of the notes, there's not a very well diagram coming out. So when you come on to do, say, your level 2 and level 3 surveys, you want to start there, obviously going into a bit more detail. So I rarely see any sketches by a surveyor showing where the cracks are and what size they are. So that's the first thing on a sketch, draw the position and direction of any cracks. Because when you got that information, and I'll show you 2 places, instances where I've done a drawing, and I'll show you how much extra information that gives you. Because it's all very well saying, well, there's a crack of this size and go down there below. But the information you need is, well, it's just, a painter picture says 1,000 words, so it's much easier to draw, have a sketch of it, I'll say like I've shown in that. than to discuss, do reams and reams of text. So try to determine the approximate age of the crack. Well, does it look fresh or does it not? Is it, dusty? Has it got cobwebs in it? Describe the serviceability. Well, can you open windows or not? Are doors? And then I'll show you how doors have been adjusted to sign. Give a thorough description of the materials. Now that's important because I will talk about, buildings with cement mortar and buildings with lime mortar. That's certainly one thing that's quite different. Are they solid walls? Are they cavity walls? Are they stone, etc.? So knowing your wall construction is vitally important. As I say at the bottom there, record details of the construction. That's a diagram here. So what you can see here is that we got, although they don't actually show where the thing is, you're guessing that the cracking is, that cracking is around that area there. So for the benefit of the video, I'm pointing out to the top window in the lounge. And then the information here, see just in a few lines and a few numbers, what you've got there is the fact that your crack is 5 millimeters there and goes up to 8 millimeters there. So it gets wider, that's an important thing. This is an outside, as it says. Where it's a solid line, that's a crack on the outside. And where it's a dashed line, that's a crack on the inside. So we've got cracks on the outside and on the inside lining up. So we'll go on to that, but that's another marker for it being foundation movement. And it also refers to doing plumb surveys and level surveys. I've never really done that actually, so perhaps a bit more detail. If it's a building about to fall down, that looks as if it's got major movement. And we'll talk about major movement, because I know that JJ likes buildings that are collapsing or got major movement, so I'll come on to that later. So I was saying in this bit, or to somebody else, because I can't remember, but why I don't come across much subsidence in my area in South Wales, because on the left-hand side here, we've got the distribution of firm shrinkable clays. So where I'm now, and where you are, is in the area of shrinkable clays. So those surveyors working around here will come across, and this one on the left-hand side shows the distribution of underpinning. So you can see that the two things correlate. So where you got a lot more underpinning is where you got a lot more shrinkable clay, because that's where you get, you don't need trees. If you've got shallow foundations, just the natural variation of having, a wet winter and a dry summer will make that clay shrink, foundations go down, houses crack. While I'm in South Wales, I only get 1%. I do get mining subsidence there, although somebody was saying they have mines in Kent, wherever that is, down there, and up in Yorkshire and Nottingham, somewhere around there. So, yeah, generally, if you strike a line from just north of the Wash and go down to Bristol, so anything south of there, you're in shrinkable clay country. And if you're above there, you're not. It's quite it's a geological phenomenon of the UK, because where I am in South Wales, it's a heavily glaciated country. You've got the South Wales valleys that were created by that. Next one. Right. I keep on forgetting what's next. So this is in your handbook. So this is probably the most critical one. So what are you looking for when you think you've got subsidence cracking? Firstly, you want the cracks to go from the ground all the way up to the top. If you've just got cracks in the middle there, and it doesn't slope and it's not on the inside, then you haven't got subsidence. So you want something that's going from all the way up to the top. You also want it to be small at one end and big at the other. It can be the other way around, so we'll go on to that. This is generally because that corner, the left-hand corner of the building, has settled down. You want the cracking to be on the inside as well, although it doesn't say that. But in that previous slide, where you had it dotted, so you had cracks on the inside. If you just have cracks on one face, not the other, and there'll be a case study at the very end, which I only did last week actually, so I had to rush it to JJ. He said, "Oh look, it says you cracking study, I think, that is purely cracking on the outside and not on the inside." What else? Oh yeah, during the sloping line. But when I was putting all the slides together, I was thinking, oh God, I don't think many of my case studies of subsidence model that exactly, but they do in a way. So we'll go through that. How are you going so far? Any questions? Nope. Right, and then the next thing to do is to work out where the movement is, okay, is to look to see if there's a big blue arrow on the building. No. I've put what you do is I think Malcolm Holland on one of his talks, I saw videoed, he said, "The hand of God will point down and show thee where thy building is moving." So if you take a line, that's a general line of fracturing, and then take a line at 90 degrees, and you point it downwards, hopefully, then it tells you something going on around there. So the building is telling you what it's doing, or I say the cracking. You say, I mean, going back to the very first one. I say why I love that job is that it's like a story. You're doing a pathology thing on it, a bit like a pathologist or cutting open a dead body. They're finding the history of how that person died and why they died by looking at all the clues. So all the clues are there for what's happening. So all those things want to tie up. So if you've just got one thing, but not all of them, then you haven't got foundation movement or subsidence. And this is the other way. So when you say we're on shrinkable clay, and you've got trees nearby, then you say, "I'm going to cut them down." I don't want those trees there. That is what you get. Those trees were sucking water out of the ground. Cut them down, and they stop doing that. The ground recovers, and because I live in the 1% of the country that doesn't have, I haven't got a great experience, but I have heard that the heave can be worse than the subsidence. So it's just subsidence in another direction. So there's helpful arrows there. Again, when you do surveys, you won't find arrows in the ground like that. So it would be helpful if they were. Right, yeah. Now, where am I? When the chap who did, this first edition of Subsidence, a chap called Brian Clancy, that was produced the first edition was 1994, and he came round kind of hawking that, and he gave a talk at the Institute of Civil Engineers in Cardiff. And this is a photo that's still in the rewrite, the Subsidence book. And he put this slide up a bit like this. So you've got this nice, I say nice, awful boring 60/70 extension. Looks okay, it's all square, there's no cracks. But you need to look at it in relation to the surrounding buildings. Thank you. That's what you want to react. You're awake. So that's moved a bit and moved en masse. I mean to say, I was saying to somebody that I've only had one case of mining subsidence that I've investigated, but most of the time I'm designing things to mitigate against the effect of subsidence. So I said that could be a raft foundation. So actually when I go back tomorrow and the day after, I'll be designing a raft foundation for a new house. So that makes it nice and stiff. And the whole point of that is that you can get a 3-meter void appearing underneath that house and it will still stay up. You've got a rigid enough foundation to stop any movement. But that was kind of a mass movement, so I think it was some underground thing that happened. Right, so going back to the, when I gave about, a brief history of my background. The third firm I worked for, in about 1990, we were called in to look at this major cracking in Brimau. Does anybody know the area of South Wales? If I said Brimau, yeah, you do know, right? Yeah. This is called Pleasant View. Because it's not quite a pleasant view because you're high up above Brimau. So it's not very much, not the most attractive of places. But it was this building on the right. Again, you can see that sign there saying unsafe building. And what happened about, 2 or 4 in the morning, the occupants of that house were woken up by loud cracking. So the earth moved for us. It says, we're too old for that kind of thing, But I think they literally got out because, if I go a bit, because I say, they got this large cracking here. And it just, and I was always talking to somebody earlier about, if you've got big cracks, let's say 20 or 15, 20 plus millimeters wide, because going back to that BRE digest table, one thing I didn't say is that if you're in category 4 or 5, it's about to collapse. So that was what that was. But they say, some surveyor said to me in the early days when I was giving these talks, surely all 10, 20, 30 millimeters cracks have to start off as 1, 2, or 3. And I went, oh yeah, because I hadn't thought about that. But some cracks just appear, but cracks can progress in size. The other thing about this is we were measuring, because someone was talking about, I think today, and then putting glass telltale signs, and I was telling him off. You can see the great big mortar blobs they put through. They're a complete waste of time. Now, I forgot to bring along some, I brought along quite a few goodies here to show you, but I've got, if I said avant-garde telltales, you know about that, yeah. They also have a really good ruler that measures crack sizes, because it's difficult to tell, a 0.5 and a 1 and a 1.5. They have all about 6-inch ruler with all these bands on. So I would look that up because it's really handy because I was using that on this job last week to measuring all the crack sizes. And it's much easier doing that than getting your tape up against it. What we did was we put little stainless steel studs. We just aerodated them on the wall, and then you used a vernier gauge, and we were recording the size of the cracks in there daily, and it was just going up, going up, going up, going up. So if you talk about progressive movements, this was progressing and not stopping. So eventually those houses had to get pulled down. So there's your, collapsed building. But going back, so it's now just like a playground area, which is interesting because the houses were pulled down, because all the residents knew that it was due to mining subsidence. It was felt that there wouldn't be any confidence in the local people to live in a house that was over. And it was filled with grout. Somebody else was talking about, some subsidence. So we just pumped loads. It was an old iron ore working. That was it. Because it was like an 18th or 19th century works. And so those two semis, so one there and one there. So I reckon that the hole was there. So this house here was sinking down. This pair here was sliding into it. So it's really localized, and that's what you'll find with subsidence like swallow holes. The area around it is fine, but there's a gaping hole like down at your very feet. So so over it you've got kind of a diagonal crack in there, but the cracking was so severe that the whole thing just collapsed down. So it's semi-diagonal, and you're saying, well, does it go up to right up from ground to the roof? It doesn't quite, but then it's basically this part of the building to a certain extent is arching over, because when you're underpinning, you're taking part of the foundation away, but you're only doing it in a 3-foot, 900 mil section. So what the wall is doing is arching over. And then oh yeah, the hand of God comes again. So again, so that tells you, where that movement is, and it's pointing down to a. If I stand here, I've been blocking your view. Oh, okay, great. So it points down to this very localized area, and then the house behind it, okay, has got a cracking pattern completely different. So that's. Well, at least this does go from the ground up to the roof. Okay, so that whole thing was sliding it across. And again, we put studs on that, and that was just opening up all the time. And then have I got arrows? Yeah, so that's going across and that's going down. So going down towards the epicenter of that substance. Just to confirm, this was inside, so a slight gap there. You can do the hoovering underneath the skirting board then. And doorways moving a bit. They've just been all refurbished, and actually it shows you the quality of the refurb. It's counter refurb. Somebody just stuck a bit of plasterboard in there. But it didn't matter, because as I say, they just got demolished. Bit of a gap there. So just really dramatic movement. I've never come across dramatic movement like that. And actually, when I keep on talking about substance, so this was before I went self-employed, which I did in 1992. Since then, I've probably come across about 4 or 5 cases of subsidence. So most of the cracking I come across is not. This was, I'd say late 90s. This was a house in Island, just outside Abergavenny. It's basically a bungalow, but it's built up, so the ground slopes up quite a bit down the side. And this was whilst we were doing the works. So this was basically settlement due to escape of water, which is all the substance I found in my self-employed has been escape of water. I haven't actually come across any mining subsidence since I've been self-employed. And then this is round the side, not towards the back, so you can see this opening up there. So again, this is not typical, sloping, cracking, but it's gone there because that's where the DPC is. So that's obviously a weak point in the building, and that's a close-up. And I don't know if you can see, but there's a stainless steel stud. Oh, there and there. So they're about, about ½ an inch diameter. And they've got a little hole in the middle, so you can put the pointers for the vernier gauge into them, and you can measure the cracking there. So what we did there was to find that the rainwater pipes, which is just there on the right-hand side, wasn't going anywhere. It was just saturating the ground around. So we built a soakaway right at the front of the house and took the water down there. And this is round the corner at the back. So, you can see the studs there again. So that's quite a good way, because then you can measure downwards movements and outward movement, because you have got both there, because that's basically the wall just settling down and moving out. And that's inside, so a bit of opening there. And then we're talking about serviceability, doors and windows sticking. That tells me a whole story. So, in that movement has been going on for quite a while, to such an extent that they have and I was trying to work out what's happened. I think they must have added a bit to the door, because sometimes you plane bits off if it's going their way, but sometimes you add a bit, because that bit has obviously gone down. So the door its head would be just going across there, and they must have just added that, and you can see there's still a bit of a gap there. But they kind of, in a way, lived with that until it got too much. Right, this is about 5 or 10 years ago. This is actually a house owned by a father and an estate agent, and he didn't have any insurance on the house. So he had to pay for all the piling that was done on himself. So you can just about see some cracking there and there. Again, it's not very typical sloping cracking, but it's not just, well, I'll talk about later about non-foundation, which is mainly thermal shrinkage and expansion. No, it is certainly not that, because if you look at it in closer detail, you can see both the perpend or the perpendicular joints moving and the bed joints have moved down. Because if you do get shrinkage cracking, and I'll show you that later, you just get cracking in the perpend joints and hardly anything in the mortar bed. So that's obviously settlement of that corner. And down at the bottom, similar thing. And then curiously, this is two photos. The brickwork below the DPC just shifted out. What we did there, so I don't know if was this. So if I just go back, that's not back. Right. Basically, we knocked down all the left-hand side of that elevation, and probably a bit of the return, and then put piled foundations outside and inside, and did zig. So I'm not talking a lot about repairs. I'm just, did this zigzag inside and outside because we kept the old foundation in there. Because we did a site investigation and we found out that the foundation, which were reasonable depth, about 2 foot down, 600 mil, but were just resting on crap, which is a technical engineering word for not very good founding material. There's a thing called an SPT, standard penetration test, and it sounds great, but you just got a hammer and you thud it down, and you see how many blows it takes to go through a certain amount, I think about 3 inches, 75 mil. And it didn't get this N value, or SPT, or the number of blows, didn't get to reasonable value until about 4 or 5 meters down. So it just wasn't practical to underpin that way far down. So that's why I went for this piled foundation solution. So it cost them a lot of money, but it's what you get when you don't have bloody insurance. And this is a later one, probably about 2 years ago, where I'm going to start blaming structural engineers now, because a surveyor did a study of it and didn't even do any diagram of the cracking, reported the cracking as, didn't even say what the size of the cracking was either. So not only surveyors can get it wrong, but structural engineers didn't do any diagram. Was blaming the movement, because movement was in this part, on this tree here. So we'll see, I'll show you later that this part of the house, the front bit, was all fine. But somehow the foundations of that had just leapt underneath the ground and affected the middle of the wall. Not on your Nelly, I'm afraid. So that's closer up at that. You can't quite see it, but there is some biggish movement there. And I think, the other interesting thing is it's always interesting to find out, do some background, see if neighbours know something. I'll show you go on to neighbours' land later. But I did some research on Facebook of this house and came across somebody who now lives in Australia, who used to live there in the 60s and 70s. And she came up with that photo of the building. So much the same, quite nice, but and you can see how I hate conservatories with a passion. And they've built it there. Because so if you go to that, there's a nice, French doors there, there's a nice door, and a little greenhouse, and you've got a little patio area there. Much as the rest of it is the same. But anyway. You can see the crack a bit better now. Now, the interesting thing, again, here is that garage would probably be built on. You weren't able to really, because when you look at an elevation, and you can stand back and you look at the whole thing. And again, when you do a drawing of pattern cracking, you can stand back, mentally, as it were, and look at how the whole thing is operating. You couldn't even physically do that here. So what I did, I say that the other engineer didn't do, was to we'll do a plan and show where the cracking is, and it's on there. And there was some cracking internally, so you felt there was a kind of a line of movement there. And this is where you got manholes. So they did also, actually, to give them credit, that they did spot that there was leaks in the manholes. They had a drainage survey done. As I said, all the subsidence investigations I've done have been really leaking water from drainage. So that, but I did this wonderful sketch because I say the garage is here, so it prevented that. So what you get to see is what a whole mess of doors and windows and openings, because structural engineers would be much happier if a wall didn't have any openings or doors at all, much stronger. You say, what's your doors and windows for? But it's just a mess. So in a way, it's no surprise that when, you've got, I put a bit, an arrow there, an arrow there. So obviously, the biggest culprit is a leaking gully from that rainwater pipe. So causing that. So again, you've got, in effect, movement. So if you've got a door opening, then basically the crack can go up there and then start there. So you've got 5 there and 10 there. And again, I've drawn a solid line for the outside and a dotted line for the inside. They line up. They increase in size. They go from ground to, that's all the factors for it being subsidence movement were ticked there. And a bit there as well, actually. So on that plan, you saw, so the drainage was mainly towards the back of the house. So you got leakage from there. So you've got 2 areas of movement there. Oh right, yeah, this. So if you do, when you're surveying a building and you come across the fact that it has been underpinned, this is what you want to look for, and it's something that was started off by this book here, Certificate of Structural Adequacy. So certainly certificates for surveyors have suddenly got an importance after the Hart versus Large case. Do I see any people squirming? Everybody's got to have a professional consultant certificate because that was what was missing from that. So life is certainly a lot easier if you find out that this building has had underpinning to it, that you want a certificate of structural adequacy. Now, I did do a survey of a building where it did have it. So, if you haven't got one, I suppose that's the other thing you're going to ask, what do I do then? You shout help. Well, what I have done in a few cases of being asked to look at it and say, well, is there any problem, with the house? Say underpinning has been done 10 years ago. Then if it's been done that length of time ago, and you go along and you don't find any movement, well, you can say, well, from all intents and purposes, as far as I'm aware, that underpinning has been done successfully. You can't say carte blanche it has been. But going back to that Hart and Large case, that was one of the big problems with the case because it had just been practically rebuilt, and that surveyor, well, we all know his name because he's called Mr. Large, assumed in effect that because it was rebuilt and done to it wasn't even done to a very high standard. He assumed that all the damp-proofing elements of that house were in there, but he had no time to kind of give credence to that. It had only just been finished, and in fact, the builders, the day before he went on a survey, were repairing the front door, and apparently they went back the day after his survey. He didn't know that, but he made this assumption that because it looked all right, that it was all right. And that's a big assumption. So that. Right, we're now on to houses that have cracks that are not due to, well, not many. The owner of this house had very helpfully sprayed painted the exterior of their house to show where the cracks are. Well, no, that's PowerPoint adding to it. So I've shown that there. That's a good crack. The cracks that are there are about 1-2 millimeters wide. okay? So we don't have it going diagonally, it's all vertical. We do have cracking on the outside and on the inside, but they don't match up. They are small, but and they're vertical. And the biggest giveaway, so if you look at this area here, and it's something that, well, just over the years of doing surveys, I've gone to houses and I've seen, they're mainly kind of around the entrance. They put this reconstituted stone, it's made out of concrete. I think they put with some bits of stone in it. But as soon as I see that, I said, right, where's the cracking here? I'm going to find cracking. For some reason, and I go back to the Charing Cross Hospital, where we had great difficulty to stop the builder from making the mortar too strong. It is something that they're like, oh, it's a strong block. We must have strong mortar. He says, no! And slap them in the face and just hope they aren't big and tattooed like, so we were saying about the scaffolders. So and again, the owner had drawn a nice moustache along the line of the cracking. But that's where it was. And you can see, it just looks really strong mortar. Because what that does is that, well, it hasn't been too strong. Sometimes the cracks won't go through the mortar because the mortar is too strong. The brickwork or the stone or the concrete blockwork, in effect here, will crack instead. Oh yeah, I just forgot. The other reason I brought this along is to say that brickwork and concrete blockwork is great in compression. Now, most of the time, that's what it's doing. Okay, the loads are going down and it's squashing it. It's not a drawback. It's just a feature of it. Same with concrete blockwork. It's got a tensile strength in the order of about 10 times weaker in tension than it is in compression. So that's probably got a compressive strength of about 10, 20, 30 in compression, newtons per millimeter squared. But it's got a tensile strength of 1, 2, 3 newtons per millimeter squared. Catch. So yeah, you can get cracking. That's why you get cracking in there. Because what it's doing is during the day, and especially that kind of, when you've got this sunshine, very warm day, it expands out, okay, and then it gets to like a corner, and that's a point of restraint. So and everything goes into compression. Then at night it gets very cold, and it goes, it kind of relaxes, and as it relaxes, it's all going into tension. So that's when you get the cracking. And then this was. Again, I can't remember where it was, and it wasn't the job I was looking at, but I thought, oh yeah, there's bound to be a crack in there, or there was a crack. But it's an enormous expanse of brickwork, no movement joints in it at all. So concrete blockwork, I don't know if I say that, should have movement joints every 6 meters. Brickwork, somewhere between 9 and 12 meters. But I think it was there, towards the right-hand side, where you can see the cracking a bit closer up. Whoop, there is there. But again, so again, you can see cracking right through the brickwork. Okay, and it's stretcher bond, so I would imagine that's a cavity wall. I didn't go on the inside. It's vertical. There's no cracking in the mortar beds. It's purely in the perpen joints. Okay. Right, and now we're getting on to knowing what your construction is. So this is a house built probably about the same age as my house, beginning of the 20th century, built with lime mortar. Do you know what the crooked house looked like before it was purposefully demolished and set on fire? You know the pub in Birmingham or in the Black Country. It had all that distortion, and that was because of mine workings underneath. Because it happened quite slowly, the lime mortar was able to take up that form without cracking. If it was cement mortar, it would just and just crack suddenly. But you can see here that I'm pretty sure that originally that canopy would have been level, and also you can see there's a bit of a whoa, bit of a sea wave there, and so it's really useful actually having coping lines like that. Coping lines or cornicing lines, or anyway. in houses, because they should be nice and straight. If they're not, then you think, something's moved. So basically, this house, because I was surveying number 1 here, and you can see a detail here, that left-hand side had dropped down one whole course. So that was 75 millimeters lower on the left-hand side, just over, what, 900 mil wide, and you'll see the effect on the inside, because that's a slope in the landing. In fact, after it, I said, I must show this to some estate agent. And I did. One estate agent, she went in there, and she said, oh, God, I've got to come out, John. I'm getting vertigo. I mean, there's some houses I've gone into, and you feel, I feel a bit drunk, because it's twisted and moved all over the place. And again, you can see on the, that's a bathroom window. It's tilted. So, yeah, I mean, that was interesting because I did pop in about 2 or 3 weeks ago when the owners moved in and said, I wonder what you're doing to it. And I think they levelled the landing downstairs, and they were going to, because again, the stairs were sloping, that away. They would just, it'd be an enormous expense to put in whole new stairs. And I said, well, you can just put in furrings, just re-level it. So you're not going up the stairs like that. So that was a case of living with it, because I said, well, there's no evidence. The other thing is, if that was still moving, you'd see, I suppose, you'd see many of the paint finishes opening up. And if it's fairly old decorations, 10, 20, 30 years, so you can say, well, nothing's moved significantly if that's not been painted for 10, 20 years, for 10, 20, 30 years. So, because I reckon that movement happened fairly soon after it was built. Because I reckon that was settlement of the house. For some reason, that house was on a weaker footing than the other house. Right. And then this is a similar thing here, where you've got movement there. I mean, so that if you keep an eye on that, that looks a bit wobbly, because it's cracked similarly there as there. But about a year after I took that photo, this is a semi-collapse JJ, not a full collapse, but that fell down to the ground. What happened there? I haven't got much time to actually do this, but again, the structural engineer who went there before I did said it was due to the bay window settling, and I said, well, rubbish, because if you look at that sill there, which you see there, that indicates to me what is happening is that pier has settled down. So if you go back there, because if the bay windows had settled like that, then okay, you'd get movement to the top of that slanting down, but on the other one you get it slanting down in the mirrored version, but it's not. It's straight. So I reckon what you've got down is settlement of that pier and that pier. Right. And this is the one I went to last week that I rushed to JJ because it was so interesting, because the surveyor said, oh, there's cracking here. It's due to foundation movement. We don't know if it's progressive or non-progressive. You're going to need underpinning. And I thought, that's interesting. So I looked at it. I did. Now, again, because it's diagonal, I thought, okay, well, it could be. You've got diagonal crack in there, and you've got lots of cracks along there. But, and that kind of my cracking spider senses were going, bloody concrete reconstituted blockwork again. Paint. I hate that very bloody reconstituted blockwork like a passion. And pretty vertical cracking, and again, going through the block because the mortar is far too strong. Naughty bloody bricklayers. There. And then, and it did some wonderful sketches. Okay, I did it because I wrote the report yesterday actually and sent it off. And I tidied it up a bit. But these are my site notes for there. So again, it's measuring the crack size, where it is, and just giving dimensions. I could do it, sketch fairly accurately to scale. And then that's on the other side. And when I went into that side, I started thinking, nah, this is not Subsidence at all. Because, well, mainly because I hadn't got that window with that diagonal cracking. And I got cracking was purely in the perpends there, nothing in the mortar beds. And then a sketch again. But no cracking on the inside. So this is in the garage. So the garage was lower down and the bungalow was above it. And that's the other side, no cracking at all. So again, I could immediately rule out the subsidence. And it was just due to expansion and contraction. There are no cracking on the inside. So that's the bathroom upstairs. So that was where you got the sloping cracking on the outside. Another interesting thing was, did anybody here associated with Sava? Because I gave a talk about retaining walls the other week. No, right, yes. Because I was talking about trespassing. Because I thought, well, look, there's it's a mirror. That's a party wall line. So there's an identical property on that side. I wonder if they've got the same kind of cracking on there. So I knocked on their door, went up, there's no reply. So I did go through their garden gate there. But what I'm saying at this Sava talk is there's two types of civil trespass and criminal trespass. So if I had to, break that door down or go with my bolt croppers, equipped to investigate, that would be criminal. But civil trespassing, all the person can do is tell you, get off my land. They weren't in, so I just had a good one. Exactly the same cracking was on that side as there was on the other. Now this is purely for JJ, because I think hope it'll work. This is what I showed retaining walls, but if you're going to collapse. Watch this bit here. This is how retaining walls go without much warning. So, right. Houses tend not to do that. Now, just for fun, I'll do that. Yeah, do that again. Because houses have lots of things tying each other in, and floors and intersecting walls. But if you were underneath that, you'd be squashed tomatoes. Right. Are there any questions? Yeah.
On the previous one where you got expansion and contraction, what you were recommending?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. All that. Well, raking them out and filling them with a soft mortar, something like 129. Because interestingly, even when I first started in 1981 working for Old Arabs, when we were specifying mortar mixes, it was always 116 or 129. So that's cement, lime, sand. And the lime in that is hydrated lime. So it's not hydraulic lime. And it's there purely to give workability. I have seen some builders say, we use it, because it just showed how they make the mortars far too strong. We use a 1-4 or 1-5. It should be, well, if they use plasticizer, it should be 1-7 sand. So yeah, you're purely raking it out and then pointing out. So it will allow it to, in a way it's formed its own movement joint, you see. So you certainly don't want to put a strong mortar in there. Yes, hello.
Yeah, what repair did you recommend on the slide you showed with the drainage issue on the side of the house?
So the question is, what did I recommend for the repair on this house? And the answer is that, well, repair the drains, do the superstructure repairs. I don't think I haven't got a crack of the wall in, but there was, yeah, there was quite a big crack here actually, because that wall had just separated away. Because it was just because what the builders had done, they concentrated on getting continuity around the corner for the cavity wall, but this was just butt jointed on. So there, I recommended putting some helifix ties to bond it together. Does that satisfy you? Any others? Yes?
Have you come across any stress fractures or cracking as a consequence of cavity wall insulation?
No. Oh, the question was, have I come across any cracking due to cavity wall insulation?
Perspective, rejected.
Yeah. No. Although, I mean, is anybody in the Facebook, the Surveyors Hub community, which is run by Marion Ellis? Yeah, because I mean that was on recently. That was a Lang Easy Form thing, which is obviously non-traditional house. I think has got reinforced concrete panels, and the question there was had the ties between the two panels corroded. And I said, well, it could be at an edge of a reinforced concrete panel. Or it could be, but and yeah, I mean, you know, I don't know. I can't think there's a very large expansive force. I mean, if they put expanding foam in, I suppose.
No, it's more the saturation of the wall.
I don't think so. Yeah, I doubt it. Yeah,
Sorry,
I doubt it. Yeah, but I don't know because I never come across it. I think the other thing is also, yeah, just I know. Is that there are some cracks that come across, and I say, well, I don't know why they're there, but they're in that 0 to 1 category. So if it's a homeowner rather than somebody selling a house, I'll just say, well, fill it in and see what happens. If it reappears in a year's time, we'll have to do something serious, you know. But you know that in a way is tells you it's kind of a crack gauge, you know, if you fill it back in. I suppose it's a bit difficult, but I've never come across something where I say, well, just do this, you know, fill it in. Or I'll say a pre-purchase survey, and it's bitten me in the backside, as it were. So, yeah. Right. Thank you.